Demon-Kissed, Chapter 17. Locking his gaze with mine, Isaac stared at me for a long moment and then slowly let go. He stepped back, then returning to human form, he sneered at me and went back into the house. I repositioned my hat, tugged my coat back into place, and followed after him. "What was that about?" I asked Alistair, as I closed the door behind me. Receiving no response, I moved to his side and followed his gaze up the stairs. A low-voiced argument drifted to my ears, and I turned to regard Alistair quizzically. "My once peaceful home has become a madhouse," he said, not looking away from the stairs. I remained silent, just watching him and waiting. I had never seen him like this before, puzzled and uncertain. Uncertain and Alistair had never been two things I would have put in the same sentence, and I was curious as to the cause, though I could guess. "She detests me, you know," he continued after a moment, and a sharp denial echoed through my mind, making me wince. I was unaccustomed to having people shout in my head, and that had hurt. No sooner had that thought crossed my mind than I felt, rather than heard, her apology. "How can you be certain of that?" I asked, shushing my mental eavesdropper. Upstairs a door opened, then closed softly. There were fast footsteps, and then another door slammed shut, and in my mind I heard a weary sigh. "She has not told me that she detests me, if that is what you mean," he said, and finally turned toward me, away from the stairs. "If she hasn't told you she does, then it probably means she does not detest you," I said. "In any case, I've about given up the idea of getting her to like me. Come, we have much to discuss," Alistair said, and began walking down the hall to what I presumed was his office. "Why did Isaac attack me?" I asked, falling into step a little to his right and behind him. "Ah, that," he said flatly, and then continued. "He had a vision earlier this evening, and now refuses to let me ask Erin for her help in extracting our traitor. His exact words were, 'over Nick's dead body or mine.' He stopped in front of a set of old pine pocket doors, opened them, and strode into the room beyond. Following him into the room, I looked around curiously and noted several interesting items that set it far apart from my own. The items were 3 Ming Dynasty vases, 2 of the smaller paintings I had done for him, and 4 fairy figurines that I had also made. I decided to integrate similar items into mine, with my own artistic touch, of course. I immediately began imagining 3 of my vases, 2 paintings, and perhaps 4 of my special figurines in my office. Though the forest green wallpaper also set his office and mine apart, I would not put that color anywhere in my home, let alone where I did paperwork. I'd fall asleep, it would be so boring. Hysterical laughter sounded from overhead, and Alistair looked up at the ceiling. "Oh my God, you two couldn't be more different if you tried," Erin said in my mind, followed by more laughter from upstairs. "Good gods, she's laughing! I've tried for years to make her laugh like that, and though I would like to know why she's laughing now, I do not care, only that I finally got to hear it," Alistair said, his tone filled with a strange mix of joy and melancholy. "Did Lucian tell you what we found tonight?" I asked, rather than comment or ask the 1,000,001 other questions that were tripping over themselves in my mind about the woman behind that beautiful sound. "Much as I would like to hear this discussion, I'm going to try and go back to sleep," she said, and the door in my mind began to close. Not even realizing that I was doing it until I had done it, I reached out telepathically and stopped her, holding the door open. "Please, leave the door open," I said, and felt her hesitate for a moment, then felt her presence leave my mind completely, but the mental doorway remained open. Curious as I was about Erin Malone, I left the door between our minds alone. I sensed that trust was not something that came easily to Erin, and I had no wish to abuse the huge amount of trust she had just placed in me not to pry. I also had the sense that she had no idea of the trust she had just placed in me by leaving the mental door open. There would be plenty of time to explore her mind later, and I had the feeling that if I explored without her permission, she would close it again and refuse to open it to me again as long as she was alive. For now, I was just happy she had left the path open to her mind, and hadn't closed me off from the connection. The why behind the connection was something that I would have to ask about, but I didn't think that Alistair would be too pleased if I asked him about it, or if I even mentioned it, so I kept it to myself for now. It wouldn't be the first secret I had kept from those around me over the years, and it most likely would not be the last or one of the more important ones I was keeping. Yes, he did, but I find it difficult to believe. How could something like that have been operating in my territory without my knowledge? Alistair said in answer to my question, and I returned my attention to our conversation. As Leigh said on more than one occasion, "'Tis hard to keep track of a large territory when you're busy tending to other matters. This case, I believe, falls into the category of shit happens. Now all we have to do is clean up the mess and find out how bad the damage is," I said, drifting to the windows to the far right of the mahogany desk, behind a rather comfortable-looking floral print sofa, and moved the curtains aside to look out over the large side yard. Alistair's preference for roses was in evidence in the garden, and I could see through the windows, and I had noticed more out front along the walk as Cade and I came up the driveway to the house. Thus speaks the madman. While it is true that I cannot patrol every inch of my territory on a daily basis, I do have people who do it for me and report anything strange that they notice. One would think that this would have been noticed and reported long before now, Nick, and I find myself wondering how you knew to look in that particular warehouse," he said, suspicion in his voice cutting deep and drawing emotional blood. "Would you have preferred that I keep my nose out of your business and let it continue?" I asked quietly, and turned to face him, arms crossed over my chest. We regarded each other for long moments, and he finally looked away from me, his gaze dropping to the desk. "I am sorry, Nick. That was uncalled for. This entire situation has me suspicious of nearly everyone around me, and I have no true idea of how this could have happened. I need answers, Nick, and I need them now. What you found tonight was something that I was completely unaware of, something I should have been aware of. Damn it. And yet, you knew about it, or at least suspected it, and I would like to know how you knew," he said. "I was just following rumors that I had heard, nothing more. I had started looking into this mess a week after the last group of hunters were killed. As you know, their purpose helped us keep the violence of many types of otherkin to a minimum, and a systematic slaughter of them was detrimental to our own efforts of maintaining peace between all peoples in our outer city," I said, and he nodded. Leaning a shoulder against the wall behind the left-hand window, I continued. "You may recall that I was trained to watch, listen, and investigate for the purpose of helping Leigh protect the kingdoms from her enemies. I have continued to do that job over the centuries without your knowledge. Easy enough to do, really. All I usually had to do was have someone else report my findings, and never had to report on it myself. I was only doing my job, Alistair, and nothing more, when I went to that warehouse tonight," I finished, and silence fell over the room. I could see him thinking about what I said, and left him to draw his own conclusions about it. I had never really cared whether or not someone trusted me, or even liked me for that matter, just so long as the matter I had reported was tended to, and if it wasn't, I would take care of the problem myself. I'd done that more than once over the centuries, and not given a damn. But in cases where I gave someone information about something like this, it would be nice if the people I told would do something with what I told them, rather than think about the how behind my information. How you heard rumors about this is a curiosity, but irrelevant at the moment. What I want to know is, how far does this mess go, and what do we do about it? He said, after a while, and I shrugged. To be honest, Alistair, I haven't been able to track it any farther than your warehouses, and I have been trying. Until I can dig up any more information about it, we're all pretty well in the dark, and I do not have very many leads that I can follow. 2 of those leads are currently residing in your home, and one, from what I understand, is in no shape to be questioned. The other is just a plain pain in the ass at the best of times, and will probably be difficult just to be difficult, I said, and from the open doorway in my mind I felt a faint sense of unease. Reaching out telepathically, I calmed Aaron's dreaming mind and took a quick peek at the dream. It was a nightmare of some sort, and I decided to keep a mental eye on it, so that I could gently wake her if the dream became too much for her. Fine. If you find any more out, let me know immediately. In the meantime, what do we do with what you have so far? Because, Nick, we must do something, and I do not believe my original idea of going to Inner City to retrieve our traitor will work. Not with what you have just told me, and the bloody vision Isaac had earlier this evening, he said, and sighed. You mentioned a vision earlier. What was it about? I said. I know not. Isaac wouldn't tell me anything beyond that taking both yourself and Aaron was a massive mistake that he would ensure I did not live long enough to regret, he said. I've a feeling that the vision ended badly, but it does not truly explain why he attacked me, or why he would threaten you, for that matter. Isaac's behavior is odd, even for a demon who has marked a human as a companion, I said musingly, and continued. If I did not know that you or I were more his type, I'd say he was acting like a jealous man in love. I would have drawn the same conclusion, my friend, if I had no knowledge of his preferences, Alistair agreed, then added, It is still odd, though, for him to be so protective of her, and to such an extreme. The only thing we can do at the moment is wait for him to tell us what he saw and do our best to minimize the chances that the outcome will completely coincide with the vision once he does. We could begin training together as a team again, to minimize the risk of failure and create contingency plans as necessary. Tell me, what was your plan to get in and out of Marlowe's territory alive, and what Isaac's objections were to it? I said. Truly, you are Lay's creature, Nick. You remind me of this nearly every time I royally screw things up and find myself clueless as to how to fix it. You never fail to bring up an idea that would have never occurred to me or anyone else, and I thank you for it, he said, and I shook my head slowly. Keep your thanks for now, Alistair. You can thank me later, when I actually come up with a plan to truly deal with this clusterfuck of a situation, and we actually get it dealt with, I said. Well then, we should get started on a solution, should we not? I will tell you my plan and what Isaac had to say about it. Then you can tell me what you think, he said, and proceeded to tell me. As I listened to the plan, I couldn't help but note that I was not the only one whom Lay had taught, and very well at that. The entire time he was speaking, I tried to find any kind of fault in his plan, and could find none. Oh, the plan had flaws aplenty, but they were minor details and could be worked out later or as needed. The only thing that I could truly point to and say that is beyond stupid too, was taking a human not trained in our politics into the shark-infested waters of Inner City. The vampires under the dome were the worst sort, and if we messed up, and there was every chance we could mess up no matter how well we planned this, there would be bloodshed on both sides. I could not recount all the jobs Leigh and I had done together that figuratively and literally went to hell because of one small detail that went unnoticed in the planning phase of the mission, or because one person was not where they should have been. I could easily see this plan going to hell no matter what we did to prevent it. And that was not a slight against Alistair by any means. Far from it, actually. His plan was solid except for a few small details, and those oversights could be easily fixed. No, what I meant was that best laid plans and best intentions fell to the wayside when dealing with supernatural beings of any kind. I can work with Erin on other politics fodder, teach her our laws, and train with her in the self-defense areas that may need some work. It's not a solution, per se, but it will have to do until we have more information to go on, and do not forget, if I train her, she will be far more dangerous to other kin than she is now, I said when Alistair finished speaking. Why would you offer to train someone you have only heard about in hand-to-hand combat with one of our kind? And why you, one of our family's best close-up fighters? I am not saying I do not trust you with her training. I do, my friend. I do trust you to train her, and within an inch of her life if necessary. But I wonder why you would choose to train a woman you have never met, now, after training with no one for over 300 years, he said. There was a slight disturbance on the surface of my mental shields as he spoke, and I smirked a bit. You won't be getting your answers from me by cheating, Alistair. My shields are the strongest in the whole of the Otherkin Guild of the Black Rose, the strongest in the family, and you know why I had to have them as strong as I do. I could have been the cause of everyone's deaths at any time, but I was a great risk to our guild mistress, and neither she nor I wanted to take the chance that an enemy vampire would read my mind and learn everything that I knew. And I do mean everything, I said with amusement, and he laughed. Leigh told me once that you were the best kept secret and the best keeper of secrets in Europe, but she never said why she believed that, he said, laughter in his voice. Oh? And what did you believe at the time? You did not believe the same, surely? I asked, curiously, my old English accent coming to the surface as I finally relaxed a little for what felt like a little over an hour. Erin had moved on from the nightmare and was now deeply asleep. I realized suddenly that I had been tense and on my guard from the moment I sensed Erin fall asleep. It was the same thing I had done with Leigh whenever she was not by my side and fell asleep. I would remain aware of the building or surroundings while she slept. I had also guarded her back in battle and out on jobs. That was, if I was close enough to do so. There were only 3 times that I was not close enough, and all 3 times something terrible happened to her. The first time I was not close enough to protect her, she was captured by enemies, and would have been held for ransom had she not gotten herself out of trouble. The second time she was captured by a vampire who shielded their location from me, and tortured her for 6 months, and the third time I wasn't close enough to protect her. She died. Leigh had left my side for a second in battle, and in the next that I could not get to her, she died. Did I protect Erin instinctively because of the telepathic link we now shared? If so, did I want that kind of responsibility again? For that matter, did I want to be that close to anyone again, let alone a woman who I did not have a blood link to and did not really know? On the other hand, what if I had that second in battle to do over? Would I do it? In a heartbeat. If this was my second chance, did I want to take it? I wondered. Oddly enough, yes, I did believe the same, though at the time I told her that a secret that only one person knew about was easy to keep, but when many knew, it was not a secret any more, Alistair said, breaking into my thoughts by answering my question. And I told her once that some secrets weren't worth keeping, I said, and shrugged. I take it you meant yourself? He asked, and I nodded. Shaking his head, he sighed and then said, I had often wondered while she was alive, why it was she trusted you completely and no one else. Over the years since her death, though, I have learned why she trusted you and have come to trust you in much the same way. And this means? I asked. Even if you do not answer my question to you about why you would train Erin, I will trust you to do it and trust you to keep her safe when we go into the court, he said. In answer to your question, I began, making the decision to take my second chance, I want there to be one more person in the world that knows all of Lay's tricks aside from myself. Besides, teaching a human will be a learning experience for me as well, I finished. He laughed, then asked about my club and about my investigation in general. We passed another hour like this, and spent another 3 discussing the pros and cons of his plan. He also told me a bit about the fight with the walker, and how Erin came to be in his home. I hate to leave you when are still plans to make, Alistair, but if I do not go home before dawn on my own, Cade will collect me and take me there, I said, internally noticing the time and standing. You said much the same thing the last time we spent the night talking. Only then we were at your club fantasy, and if I remember correctly, he said, amusement in his voice. The girls worry when I am out, and bug the poor man until he goes out to find me. He then usually drags me back to the house and tells me to deal with them, I said mournfully, and he laughed. 5, or is it 6? Women worrying after you is not a face worse than death, my friend, he said. Shaking my head and laughing a little, I headed for the door and left his office. Making sure I get out of the house and don't linger, my old friend? I asked, as I sensed him behind me and glanced over my shoulder at him. Alistair smiled and shook his head. Making sure you are not accosted as you leave, he said, clapping a hand on my left shoulder. Great, just what I needed, another person watching out for me, I said sardonically, and he laughed. Shaking my head, I continued the rest of the way down the hall to the foyer. When I reached the entrance foyer, I spotted Kane leaning against the wall beside the front door and staring at an old grandfather clock. Do you still want to meet Miss Trouble, or are we just going home for now? Kate asked, pushing away from the wall, and I paused for a moment in thought as I reached out to open the door. Though I would still like to meet her, given the lateness of the hour and her apparent healing state, home. I can always return tomorrow evening and meet her then, I said. Your choice, boss. I just figured I'd ask, he said, and shrugged. You are referring to Erin? Alistair asked, and I nodded. To be clear on this point, before you ask, I had wanted to meet her before I volunteered to train her, I said. Why did you want to meet her? He asked, curiously. I would love to meet any being that could give you a hard time, and from what I've been told by you and others, she definitely gives you a hard time. That was my original reasoning behind wanting to meet her, and now that I will be training her, I said, and let my voice trail off, shrugging. I see, he said, laughing a bit, and continued. In that case, come back tomorrow in the late afternoon, and I will introduce the 2 of you. Be warned, however, she does not appreciate anyone or anything vampire, and I will not be held accountable if you get shot by her. Warning received and taken under advisement, I said, opening the front door and waving Cade out ahead of me. He gave me an evil smirk as he passed me, and I made a mental note to ensure that he was chained in iron before I left the house later. I still had the set of silver-laced iron cuffs and collar that I had to use on Lay more than once to keep her from killing everyone when she was blood-crazed and healing from a bad injury somewhere in the house. Though the silver in the cuffs would most likely render the iron useless in holding Cade, the thought did cheer me a bit, and I began whistling as started down the empty driveway. It was an old wartime song I had learned from Lay, and Kate began singing the words to the song softly as we walked down the street. Hearken to the Morgane's call, 'tis off to battle for us all, and until the end of war takes us through the final light, we shall fight till the last man should fall. In blood-soaked war and battle-tide, with dawn we ride to heed the Morgane's call. Not returning until they fall, we shall fight until we are called to the final light, to feast in the unseen halls. He sang, his deep lyrical voice carrying easily on the pre-dawn air, and I began singing with him when we got to the chorus, my lower bass blending and mixing well with his lighter baritone as we sang.